Scottie Pippen earned $109 million playing basketball, 6 championship rings, 7 All-Star selections, one of the 50 greatest players in NBA history. By 2023, his net worth was $20 million. Do that math again. $109 million in, $20 million left. Add the endorsements, the sponsorships, the Nike deals. Some estimates put the total losses above $120 million. The easy story is the one you already know. Athlete gets rich. Athlete spends everything. Cautionary tale. Move on. But that's not what happened here. What happened to Scottie Pippen is something more specific, more infuriating, and far more common than professional sports ever wants to admit. This is the story of a man who was betrayed systematically by the very people paid to protect him. Hamburg, Arkansas. Population, around 3,000. A small town in the southeastern corner of the state, where the economy runs thin and the distance between stable and desperate is never very far. Scottie Pippen was born there on September 25, 1965. The youngest of 12 children. His father, Preston, worked at a paper mill. His mother, Ethel, held everything together. It wasn't a wealthy life, but it functioned. Until the day Preston suffered a stroke that left him paralyzed on his right side, unable to walk properly, unable to speak clearly. Scottie was still a boy. Think about what that moment does to a child. Not just the grief of watching a parent diminished overnight, but the cold, practical reality. The family's primary earner was gone. 12 people in one house, and the margin between surviving and collapsing had just disappeared. Scottie Pippen learned something in Hamburg that would follow him everywhere he went. Money equals safety. No money equals everything falling apart. That lesson wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete, because nobody in Hamburg, and there was no reason for anyone there to know this, taught him the second half. How you hold on to money once you have it, and who to trust with it. He wasn't a heavily recruited prospect out of high school. Tall, athletic, but largely unknown outside his small corner of Arkansas. No Division I scholarships came calling. So he enrolled at the University of Central Arkansas, a Division II school, as a walk-on equipment manager. He carried bags. He organized gear. He did it specifically to practice with the team. That detail matters. Scottie Pippen didn't arrive at basketball through privilege. He arrived through a side door, doing other people's work, just to earn his shot. By his senior year, he was averaging over 23 points per game. NBA scouts who had never heard his name started paying attention fast. In the 1987 draft, the Seattle Supersonics selected him 5th overall, then immediately traded him to the Chicago Bulls, who had engineered the deal in advance. He arrived in Chicago as an unknown. He would leave 12 years later as a legend. But what happened in between those two facts is a story about what it costs to be great inside a system that isn't built to protect you. In 1991, the Bulls won their first NBA championship. Pippen was 25 years old, already indispensable guarding the opponent's best player every night, running Phil Jackson's triangle offense, doing every difficult and unglamorous thing that made Jordan's brilliance possible. That same year, the Bulls offered him a contract extension. 7 years. $18 million total. His agents advised him to wait. His value was rising. Don't lock in this early, this long, this cheap. Jerry Reinsdorf, the Bulls' own owner, reportedly told Pippen the deal was too long, that he would regret it. Pippen signed anyway, because he thought about his father, about the stroke, about 12 people in a house with no safety net. A guaranteed $18 million was something no injury, no bad season, no bad luck could take away. He wasn't being reckless. He was being the boy from Hamburg who had watched security vanish without warning. The problem was that nobody in that room could predict what was about to happen to the NBA. In 1995, a new collective bargaining agreement sent salaries into a completely different universe. The cap exploded. Stars who signed after 1995 became overnight multi-millionaires. Michael Jordan negotiated year to year and earned $33 million in the 1997-98 season alone. That same season, Scottie Pippen, 4 more rings later, All-NBA selections, one of the 50 greatest players alive, made $2.8 million. He was the 122nd highest paid player in the entire league. The Bulls could have renegotiated. The rules allowed it. Teams did it regularly. They simply chose not to. Because why would they? They had the second best player in the world locked in at a bargain price. Not one person inside that organization moved to fix it. By 1999, after the dynasty's final championship, Pippen was finally a free agent. Houston signed him for $67.2 million over 5 years. For the first time in his career, he was being paid what he was worth. He thought the worst was behind him. He had no idea what was coming. Let's be clear about something before we go any further. Scottie Pippen was not Michael Jordan's sidekick. That framing Robin to Jordan's Batman, the supporting act, the second name on the marquee, was a media construction. Convenient, easy to sell, and deeply unfair to what Pippen actually was on a basketball court. Phil Jackson, who coached both men, said it plainly. The Chicago Bulls system did not work without Pippen. Not just function less effectively, it did not work. The triangle offense required a secondary initiator with the IQ, the vision, and the defensive range to make every other piece move correctly. Jordan provided the explosion. Pippen provided the architecture. Consider what he did across those championship years. 8 consecutive all-defensive first-team selections. The kind of defensive versatility that allowed him to guard point guards, small forwards, and centers in the same game. A player who, in the 1993-94 season, when Jordan retired for the first time, carried the Bulls to 55 wins, almost entirely on his own shoulders. A player named to the 1992 and 1996 U.S. Olympic Dream Teams, competing alongside the greatest players on the planet and holding his own against every single one of them. In 1996, when Sports Illustrated surveyed NBA coaches and executives on who they would build a franchise around if Jordan were removed from the equation, the most common answer was Scottie Pippen, not Shaquille O'Neal, not Charles Barkley, not Hakeem Olajuwon. Scottie Pippen. The shadow, it turned out, carried its own light, which makes what the Bulls were paying him almost incomprehensible. By the 1997-98 season, the 6th championship, the final run, the one documented in The Last Dance, Pippen's annual salary sat at $2.8 million. Jordan earned $33 million that same year. The gap between them wasn't a gap. It was a canyon. But here is the number that truly captures the absurdity. Pippen was the 122nd highest paid player in the entire NBA. Not on his team. Not in his conference. In the whole league. Players on losing teams. Players coming off the bench. Players whose names you no longer remember, all of them collecting larger paychecks than the man helping deliver Chicago its 6th championship. His own teammates were paid more. Tony Kukoc, Ron Harper, Dennis Rodman, all of them above Pippen in the Bulls' salary structure. The organization knew this was wrong. Reinsdorf knew. Krause knew. The rules of the 1990 NBA would have allowed them to tear up the contract and issue a new one at any point. Teams did it all the time. They simply looked at the bottom line. A generational talent locked in at a fraction of market value and decided the bottom line was more important. By 1997, Pippen's frustration had become impossible to contain. That summer, he needed foot surgery, routine procedure. His doctors recommended he have it done early, before training camp, so he would be fully recovered for the start of the season. Pippen scheduled it for October instead. The media called it selfish, unprofessional, a star player holding his team hostage. The criticism was loud, and it was sustained. What got far less attention: Pippen had asked the Bulls to renegotiate his contract, repeatedly. And repeatedly, the organization had refused. This wasn't a player throwing a tantrum. This was a man who had delivered 5 championships, had been publicly underpaid for 6 years, had asked through proper channels for the situation to be corrected, and had been told no every time. The surgery delay was the only leverage he had left, and even that didn't work. The Bulls didn't move. Pippen played the season late, compromised, and delivered a 6th championship anyway. Then it was over. The dynasty dissolved. Jordan retired again. Phil Jackson left. The roster was dismantled. And Scottie Pippen, finally, was a free agent. Houston came calling. 5 years. $67.2 million. The number that finally reflected what he had always been worth. Then Portland. Another large contract. More years, more money. By the time he finished playing, Pippen had earned $109 million in NBA salary more, in total career earnings, than Michael Jordan's $94 million. He had endorsement deals with Nike, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Visa, and Frito-Lay, adding millions more on top. For the first time since Hamburg, Scottie Pippen had real financial security. Undeniable. Documented. In the bank. He just needed someone trustworthy to help him protect it. In 1999, someone came highly recommended. That recommendation would cost him everything. In 1999, Scottie Pippen had a problem that most people would consider a good problem to have. He had money. Real money. More money than anyone in his family had ever seen. More money than Hamburg, Arkansas could have produced in a generation. And he needed someone, a professional, an expert, to help him manage it. The question was who? Think about that position for a moment. You are a professional athlete. You have spent your entire career inside the insular world of an NBA franchise practice. Travel, games, hotels, repeat. Your network is basketball people. Your relationships are basketball relationships. When you need a doctor, someone from the organization recommends one. When you need a lawyer, someone from the organization recommends one. When you need a financial advisor, you ask the same people you have always asked. It's not naivety. It's the logical result of living inside a system that has structured your entire life for you. So when someone from Pippen's Bulls network pointed him toward a financial advisor named Robert Lunn, it carried weight. Lunn had credentials. He had worked at Morgan Stanley. He had worked at Lehman Brothers. His professional history read like a checklist of legitimacy major institutions, recognizable names, the kind of resume that signals someone has been vetted many times before you ever meet them. Pippen hired him, trusted him with more than $20 million. And here is the thing that makes this particular betrayal so devastating. He had every rational reason to. This is what financial experts call affinity fraud. It doesn't require a con artist in a back alley. It doesn't require obvious red flags or pressure tactics. Affinity fraud operates through trust networks, communities, organizations, industries, where people rely on shared connections to vouch for strangers. Professional sports is one of the most vulnerable environments imaginable for exactly this reason. Players move constantly. Their time is consumed entirely by their sport. Their social and professional networks are narrow and deep. When someone arrives pre-approved by that network, the psychological barriers that might otherwise protect you simply don't engage. The University of Chicago Booth School of Business published research finding that 7% of all financial advisors had been disciplined for misconduct. At some larger firms, the kind Lunn had worked at, rates ran as high as 20%, 1 in 5. Nobody told Pippen to check. Nobody checked on his behalf. The recommendation came, the credentials looked solid, and that was enough. It was never enough. The early years with Lunn didn't raise obvious alarms. Money was being managed. Investments were being made. Pippen was playing basketball in Houston, then Portland, collecting his salary, living his life. But underneath the surface, Lunn was making decisions with Pippen's money that had nothing to do with Pippen's interests. Real estate developments, speculative projects, investments that looked plausible on paper and produced nothing in reality. According to court documents filed later, Lunn cycled Pippen's funds through multiple failing ventures, the kind of moves that are difficult to detect when you're not watching closely, and nearly impossible to detect when you trust the person doing the watching on your behalf. Then came the jet. In 2002, Lunn advised Pippen to purchase a Gulfstream aircraft for $4 million. The framing, according to later accounts, was investment-minded. A private jet was an asset. It had utility. It had resale value. For someone at Pippen's level of wealth and public profile, it made a certain kind of sense. What Lunn didn't ensure, what the lawyers handling the transaction failed entirely to verify, was whether the aircraft was airworthy. It wasn't. Shortly after the purchase, inspections revealed the jet's engine required $1 million in repairs before it could legally fly. A $4 million asset that couldn't leave the ground. Pippen refused to pay for the repairs. The plane sat, grounded. The world's most expensive ornament. Pippen sued the law firm Pedersen and Haupt for malpractice for failing to conduct proper due diligence on the purchase. He eventually won a $2 million judgment in 2010. A partial recovery, but the jet itself remained a monument to what happens when every person in the chain prioritizes the transaction over the client. The jet was infuriating. It was also a distraction, because while Pippen was dealing with a grounded airplane, something far more serious was already in motion. Lunn had been taking out loans. Not small ones. Not transparent ones. According to prosecutors, Lunn approached Leaders Bank in Oak Brook, Illinois, and obtained loans totaling approximately $3 million using Pippen's name, Pippen's assets, and in at least one critical instance, Pippen's forged signature, as collateral and authorization. The money did not go toward Pippen's investments. It went toward Lunn's personal debts, his mortgage bills, his other clients, whom he was apparently paying with funds borrowed against Pippen's name without Pippen's knowledge. Pippen, at some point during this period, was sent documents to sign paperwork related to the loan. He signed them, reportedly without fully understanding what he was authorizing. Later, when Lunn needed to extend the loan and sent further documents, Pippen refused. Something felt wrong, so Lunn forged his signature anyway. The scheme continued. The debt compounded, and Scottie Pippen had no idea. Not yet. The call came from his accountant, not from Lunn, not from the Bulls network that had recommended him. Not from any of the institutional safeguards that are supposed to exist to prevent exactly this kind of thing. From his accountant, who had noticed something that didn't add up. By then, more than $20 million had passed through Lunn's hands. The question was, how much of it was still there? The answer was not enough. When the accountant called, Pippen didn't panic immediately. There had to be an explanation. Lunn was a professional. He had credentials. He had come recommended by people Pippen trusted. These things had a way of looking worse than they were before someone with the right expertise sat down and untangled them. But the more they untangled, the worse it looked. Lunn had not simply made bad investments with Pippen's money, though he had done that too. He had constructed an architecture of fraud that used Pippen's name, Pippen's assets, and Pippen's trust as raw material for his own financial survival. Court documents would later lay it out with clinical precision. Between 2002 and 2003, Lunn approached Leaders Bank in Oak Brook, Illinois, and obtained approximately $3 million in loans. The largest single transaction, $1.4 million, which Lunn claimed was for Pippen to invest in a private jet venture. The bank approved it. The money moved. It did not go toward any jet. It did not go toward any investment of Pippen's. It went toward Lunn's mortgage, toward his personal debts, toward payments to other clients he was apparently managing with the same creative accounting he had applied to Pippen's portfolio.
And the signature authorizing it? Not Pippen's. A forgery.
When Pippen eventually realized what was happening and refused to sign documents extending the loan, Lunn didn't stop. He forged Pippen's signature a second time, extending the loan without authorization, buying himself more time, deepening the hole. District Judge Charles Norgal, who would later preside over the criminal trial, was unambiguous in his assessment. This was not, the judge said, your garden variety fraud. Lunn had deployed genuine skill and calculation, presenting himself as legitimate, maintaining the appearance of professionalism, using the institutional credibility of his career history to stay one step ahead of scrutiny. In 2014, a jury convicted Lunn on 5 counts of bank fraud. In March 2016, Judge Norgal sentenced him to 3 years in federal prison. He was ordered to forfeit $2.7 million and pay $1.5 million in restitution, of which only $400,000 went directly to Pippen. Pippen had separately pursued a civil lawsuit. He won a judgment of $11.8 million. On paper, those numbers sound like justice. They were not justice. They were arithmetic. Because by the time the courts finished their work, the money Lunn had burned through, misallocated, and stolen was gone in ways no judgment could fully reverse. You cannot claw back years of compounding losses on failed real estate. You cannot unspend what was spent. The judgment was a number on paper. The loss was real. Scottie Pippen testified at Lunn's criminal trial. He described the moment he understood what had happened. The accountant's call. The documents. The realization that the man he had trusted with more than $20 million had been systematically using that trust as a weapon. He had signed papers Lunn sent him without fully understanding what he was authorizing. He had trusted the process because he trusted the person, and the person had known exactly how much that trust was worth and had spent it accordingly. But Lunn was not the only one. Let's break down who failed Scottie Pippen, because the fraud didn't happen in a vacuum. Failure 1. The Bulls organization. The recommendation that brought Lunn into Pippen's life came through his Bulls connections. The exact nature of that recommendation, how formal, how enthusiastic, how specific, is not fully documented. What is documented is that Pippen trusted it because of where it came from. An organization that had already underpaid Pippen for 7 years, that had already demonstrated it would prioritize institutional interests over his welfare, sent him toward a man who would defraud him of millions. Whether that recommendation was made carelessly or simply without due diligence, the result was the same. The Bulls network, which Pippen had every reason to trust, delivered him directly into harm. Failure 2. The lawyers. The Peterson and Haupt law firm handled the private jet purchase. Their job was due diligence to verify that the asset their client was spending $4 million on was functional, airworthy, and worth the price. They didn't. The jet couldn't fly. The engine needed $1 million of repairs that should have been caught before the transaction closed. Pippen sued for malpractice. He won $2 million in 2010. But legal victories don't recover the time, the stress, or the cascading financial damage of an asset that sat grounded for years while the litigation wound its way through the courts. Fault 3. The system itself. The University of Chicago research found misconduct rates as high as 20% at major financial firms. FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, maintains a public database called BrokerCheck, where any investor can verify an advisor's disciplinary history before handing over a single dollar. Nobody pointed Pippen toward that database. Nobody ran the check. Nobody built into his professional infrastructure the basic verification step that could have exposed Lunn before the relationship began. The NBA in the late 1990s had no mandatory financial education program for players. No required vetting process for advisors. No institutional safeguard between a newly wealthy athlete and the predators who specifically targeted newly wealthy athletes. The league has since introduced financial literacy programs. They arrived too late for Scottie Pippen. And then there was Christian Laettner. In 2016, while the Lund case was still working through the courts, Pippen and his then-wife Larsa alleged that Laettner, the former NBA player, had defrauded them of $600,000 in a real estate investment gone wrong. Larsa went public with her frustration on social media. Pippen pursued legal action. Another name, another trusted connection, another loss. By this point, a pattern had emerged that was almost too consistent to be coincidence. Every major financial catastrophe in Pippen's post-playing life had one thing in common. Someone who came pre-approved through a network he trusted had used that approval as a key to unlock his finances. The boy from Hamburg had learned that money equals safety. What he never got to learn, what the system around him never bothered to teach him, was that the most dangerous people are the ones who already know that about you. By the time the courts finished with Robert Lund, Scottie Pippen was already in his late 40s. The criminal conviction was 2014. The sentencing was 2016. Nearly a decade and a half had passed since that accountant's phone call. The legal system had moved at the speed legal systems move, slowly, methodically, indifferently to the human cost accumulating on the other side of the calendar. Pippen had won, technically. But winning in court and recovering what you lost are two entirely different things. The $11.8 million civil judgment existed as a number. The $20 million that had passed through Lund's hands existed as a memory. And between those two figures was a gap that no verdict could close. The fraud was over. The damage was not. Because Lund was not the only bill that had been running. Scottie Pippen has 8 children, 4 different women, across a span of decades that covers his entire professional career and well into retirement. Child support at that level, medical expenses, educational costs, insurance, ongoing monthly obligations across multiple households doesn't arrive as one catastrophic loss. It arrives as a constant, grinding subtraction, month after month, year after year, quietly dismantling what's left after everything else has already taken its share. Court records show Pippen was responsible for high school tuition, college expenses, healthcare coverage, and daycare costs simultaneously across multiple children. The specific dollar figures are sealed, but the structural reality is not. When you are supporting children across 4 separate households for 3 decades, the cumulative total is not small. Nobody defrauded him here. This was simply the financial weight of choices made across a lifetime. But weight is weight, regardless of its origin. Then came the divorce. Scottie and Larsa Pippen had married in 1997, the year of the 5th championship, the peak of the dynasty, when everything still felt possible. They had 4 children together. They filed for divorce in 2016, the same year the Lund sentencing finally concluded. The divorce itself wasn't finalized until 2021. The financial terms were largely kept private. What emerged publicly was this. The court ordered Pippen to divide his Chicago Bulls 401k retirement account, covering the entirety of their marriage from 1997 to 2016, as part of the marital estate settlement. In practical terms, 19 years of retirement contributions, accumulated across the peak earning period of his career, split in half. In 2021, before the divorce settlement fully landed, Scottie Pippen's net worth was estimated at $50 million. By 2023, it was $20 million. $30 million, gone in 2 years. Not stolen, not defrauded. Just the mathematics of a marriage ending and the law distributing what was built inside it. Somewhere in a different zip code, Michael Jordan's net worth crossed $3 billion. The same era, the same 6 rings, the same dynasty. Jordan's total NBA salary across his entire career was $94 million, $15 million less than Pippen's $109 million. And yet, Jordan built a business empire so dominant that Forbes once estimated his ownership stake in the Charlotte Hornets alone was worth nearly $1 billion. His Nike partnership, the Air Jordan line, generates over $1.5 billion annually to this day, decades after he last played a competitive game.
He understood early and instinctively that an athlete's name is a business, and a business requires infrastructure lawyers, accountants, advisors whose interests are legally and contractually aligned with yours. Pippen didn't have that infrastructure, not during his playing career when the Bulls controlled his environment, not after it when he was left to build his own team from scratch using a network that had already failed him once. This is not a story about talent. Pippen had talent that filled arenas. This is not a story about work ethic. Pippen worked through broken bones and contract injustice without ever fully quitting. This is a story about who was in the room, who had access to the money, who had been vetted, and by whom, and with what level of accountability. Jordan had the right people in the room. Pippen, for most of his financial life, did not. Today, Scottie Pippen is 59 years old. He published a memoir, Unguarded, in 2021, which addressed his frustrations with the Bulls, with Jordan, with the way his legacy had been shaped by a documentary that was supposed to be about a team and became, in his view, a monument to one man. He works as a Bulls ambassador. He makes public appearances. He has shifted his focus toward business in ways that suggest someone who has learned, at significant cost, what he wishes he had known at 25. He is not broke. $20 million is not nothing, but it is a long way from what it should have been, from what it would have been, with different advisors, different protections, different luck in who picked up the phone to recommend the next person in line. The fraud is over. The rebuilding continues, quietly, without championships to celebrate it. So let's go back to the beginning. $109 million earned, $20 million left. Somewhere between $120 and $130 million gone. Where did it go? Some of it went to Robert Lunn, who forged a signature and called it investment management. Some went to failed real estate ventures that looked legitimate on paper and produced nothing in reality. Some went to a jet that couldn't fly. Some went to a former teammate who took $600,000 and called it a business deal. Some went to child support obligations spread across decades. Some went to a divorce settlement that divided 19 years of a life down the middle. No single catastrophe. No one villain who explains everything cleanly. Just a system at every level that consistently took more than it gave. Here is what I want you to notice about this story. Scottie Pippen did not lose $120 million because he was reckless. He lost it because at every critical financial moment in his life, the people positioned to protect him were either unable, unwilling, or in Lunn's case, actively working against him. The Bulls locked him into a contract he signed out of fear, then refused to correct it for 7 years while profiting enormously from his underpayment. The network that organization created pointed him toward a fraudster with a forged credential trail. The lawyers who handled his transactions skipped the due diligence that would have caught a broken jet engine before $4 million changed hands. The financial system that was supposed to regulate people like Lunn had a documented 20% misconduct rate at major firms and a public verification tool that nobody thought to show him. This wasn't bad luck. This was structural vulnerability compounding over time. The boy from Hamburg had learned one half of the lesson money teaches. He had learned how to survive without it, how to grind, how to endure, how to perform under pressure when the stakes were existential. What the world around him never provided was the other half. A genuine, accountable infrastructure for protecting what he earned once he had it. Michael Jordan had that infrastructure. Built deliberately, protected legally, staffed with people whose financial interests were tied directly to his success. The difference between $3 billion and $20 million is not talent. It is not work ethic. It is not even luck entirely. It is who was in the room and whose side they were actually on.
There is a version of Scottie Pippen's story that ends differently. An agent who pushes harder in 1991. A Bulls organization that renegotiates because it's the right thing to do. A network that runs a background check before making a recommendation. A lawyer who reads the inspection report before the wire transfer clears. Any one of those changes alters the trajectory. Any one of those people doing their job fully, not adequately, not professionally, but fully, with genuine accountability to the person they were supposed to serve. And we are not having this conversation.
But none of them did. And so we are.
Scottie Pippen won 6 championships. He was named one of the 50 greatest players in the history of basketball. He represented his country on 2 Olympic dream teams. He played 17 seasons at a level that most athletes never approach even once. He earned $109 million doing it. He deserved every dollar. He deserved protection around every dollar. He got neither. Today, at 59, he is still here, still rebuilding, still, in his own way, carrying the weight of a system that took more than it should have, and finding a way to move forward anyway.
That's not a Hollywood ending, but it is, in its own unresolved way, a very human one.
6 championship rings, a lifetime of proof that greatness is not enough, that greatness, without the right people around it, can be dismantled piece by piece, transaction by transaction, signature by signature. The rings are real. The $120 million is gone. And somewhere between those 2 facts is the story of everything the system never told Scottie Pippen it was doing to him.